Let's go, Ravens! Good news is coming this weekend, and the anticipation is only going to grow from here. The Baltimore Ravens are about to make a big move that could shape their roster for years to come. I'll give you all the details, but first make sure you've hit the like button if you've been a Baltimore Ravens fan for over 19 years. It's great to see fans of all ages. Now let's talk about contracts. NFL analysts are indicating that the Ravens are closing in on a deal with left tackle Ronnie Stanley, a move that has huge implications for free agency, the draft, and the overall stability of the offensive line. If finalized, this deal would solidify Stanley's place as the team's blindside protector for Lamar Jackson, allowing Baltimore to focus its draft strategy elsewhere rather than being forced to address the offensive line early. If this deal does indeed come to fruition, it would line up with recent press conference statements from GM Eric DeCosta and head coach John Harbaugh. DeCosta had previously stated that the team would speak with Stanley's agent, while Harbaugh seemed even more confident, essentially suggesting that a deal was already done. Given Jackson's track record of accuracy, it seems almost certain that a deal is imminent. This is a critical decision for Baltimore. Stanley, when healthy, is among the best left tackles in the NFL, but his injury history has been a major concern. Over the years, he has missed significant time, making it difficult for the team to establish a stable offensive line. However, last season provided a glimpse of what a fully healthy Ronnie Stanley can do. He played every game, and his performance was strong enough that the Ravens clearly believe he's still the answer at left tackle. For the Ravens, this move wouldn't necessarily provide extra salary cap flexibility for free agency, as retaining Stanley means allocating significant funds toward his contract. However, it does allow them to approach the draft with more freedom. Without a desperate need to grab an offensive lineman in the first round, the Ravens can truly embrace their best player available philosophy. That said, the term best player available comes with a caveat. Teams still prioritize need. If a quarterback were somehow the highest-rated player on the board, Baltimore obviously wouldn't take him. But if the team locks in Stanley, they won't be pigeonholed into an offensive line pick early on. Timing is everything here. The Ravens have just over a week before the NFL's legal tampering period begins, and 12 days before the start of free agency. If Baltimore doesn't finalize this deal before then, Stanley could start fielding offers from other teams, potentially driving up his price, or even luring him away altogether. And let's be clear, there would absolutely be other teams willing to pay him more money than Baltimore. Given the scarcity of quality left tackles in the league, Stanley would be one of the top offensive linemen available if he hit the open market. The Ravens seem to recognize this and are working hard to secure the deal before that scenario unfolds. If Stanley does re-sign, it solidifies Baltimore's offensive line, bringing much-needed consistency to a group that has undergone significant turnover in recent years. Stability at left tackle, center, with Tyler Linderbaum, and right tackle, with Roger Rosengarten, is crucial for the development of an offense that already boasts playmakers like Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Isaiah Likely. Offensive line play directly impacts the success of these players, and locking in Stanley could ensure continuity and chemistry moving forward. On the flip side, there are concerns. Stanley's injury history cannot be ignored, and there's always the risk that another setback could derail his availability.
Additionally, Baltimore's salary cap situation means that every major contract carries implications for the team's ability to sign or retain other key players. That's where the conversation shifts to Mark Andrews. The Ravens star tight end is entering a crucial juncture in his career. Many fans and analysts believe Baltimore could be faced with a difficult decision. Should they move on from Andrews now while they can still get value for him? It's a painful question to ask, given everything Andrews has meant to the franchise. But with Isaiah Likely emerging as a legitimate weapon, some believe the team should trade Andrews before his contract expires, and he potentially walks for nothing. Andrews had a slow start to last season, but was a key contributor once he found his rhythm. However, his performance in the playoffs left a sour taste in fans' mouths, as his struggles in the fourth quarter were a significant factor in the Ravens' collapse against the Chiefs. While Andrews remains an elite tight end, the argument for trading him hinges on maximizing value before it's too late. After this season, his contract will be up, and Baltimore would either have to commit to a massive extension or risk losing him in free agency. This brings us to Isaiah Likely. Many believe he has the potential to be a top-tier tight end in the league, possibly even a top 3 player at his position. The only thing holding him back, opportunity. As long as Andrews is on the roster, Likely will remain the second option, but when Andrews was injured, we saw just how dominant Likely could be. His chemistry with Lamar Jackson was evident, and he consistently made plays that suggested he could thrive as the primary tight end. In Baltimore's offense, if the Ravens are considering a long-term vision for their offense, moving on from Andrews could make sense. Trading him now would bring back assets, potentially draft picks, or even a player who could help in another area of need, and from a financial perspective, it could create room to make other key moves. However, the emotional and strategic cost of such a move cannot be overlooked. There's also the question of Baltimore's defensive priorities. Some fans are pushing for the Ravens to make a bold move, such as trading for Micah Parsons or Max Crosby. Both players would provide an instant boost to the defense, but the cost would be steep. Would the Ravens be willing to part with assets like Odafoa or even Andrews to make such a move happen? And if they did, would it be worth it? There's a lot to consider as the Ravens enter this critical stretch of the offseason. The Stanley deal, the Andrews decision, and potential defensive upgrades could all play a role in shaping the team's future. But what do you think? Ravens flock. Should the team commit to Stanley despite his injury history? Is it time to move on from Andrews and hand the reins to Likely? And if Baltimore does pursue a trade for a defensive superstar, who should be the target? Let me know in the comments. This is a conversation we all need to have. One of the biggest offseason storylines for the Ravens isn't just about the offensive line or Mark Andrews, it's about how aggressive the team should be in improving the roster, particularly on defense. Some fans believe that Baltimore needs to go all in on acquiring a dominant defensive playmaker, someone who could elevate the unit to an elite level. Names like Micah Parsons and Max Crosby have been thrown around as dream trade targets. But are those moves realistic? And if so, what would the Ravens have to give up to make them happen? Let's start with Parsons. He's a game-wrecking force, one of the most dynamic defensive players in the league. If the Dallas Cowboys were ever open to trading him, the Ravens would need to offer a king's ransom. We're talking multiple first-round picks, possibly a high-end player, and maybe even more. Parsons is that valuable. The question is, do the Ravens have the assets to make such a move? And if they did, would it be worth sacrificing depth in other areas to land one superstar? Max Crosby is another name that's been mentioned, and while he's not as versatile as Parsons, he's an absolute monster as a pass rusher. Baltimore's defense thrives on pressure, and pairing Crosby with players like Justin Matabuik and Kyle Van Noy could take the Ravens' pass rush to another level. But again, the cost is the issue. Trading for Crosby would require significant draft capital and perhaps a key player